This is really exciting, and I hope that the way it goes tonight is that I do very little talking, and that all of these folks talk a whole lot. If you're here and you have anything you'd like to add, please feel free to do so. If you have questions at any time during the night, please feel free to do so. We're going to have a little bit of difficulty hearing because of the air, and we're going to have to juggle these microphones so that we get a good recording and you all can hear. But please bear with us.
I look out over this group and I see 8 or 10 people that I know. When I was growing up, I never seen this many people in the whole neighborhood. It's quite a change. I've taught school here, and I look down through here, and I taught everybody's children. It's in this row, except Miss Una Mae, and she has not been married. So, I've seen a lot of changes. A lot of changes. Now, to tell you how old Miss Una Mae is, when I was a teenager, 12, 13 years old, she used to carry about 20 of us around in her 57 Ford and take us to town and buy us an ice cream cone. That was many years ago, but truly, there's as many people right here as that I would see in a month when I was growing up. There were no houses along the river. I lived up at Long Island, was born and raised there. I lived in a cotton mill village, and it was quite a life. When I was growing up, I lived in a mill village, and there was people next door, just kind of like our towns are today, but it was quite different. We were all related, kin one way or two ways or several ways, and we were so close that you would eat at this house if you were over there playing, or I have spent nights in the other people's houses. I just holler and tell my mother I wasn't coming home, or something like that. People were so close that you would think that we were all brothers and sisters. You don't find that today. I look back and I see old John Cutchin over here. I taught John in school. He became a lawyer, and now he's kept me out of trouble. So it's pretty
so
good.
Far.
Well, I'm just about to the age where I don't think I can get in any more trouble. I have one story, and I want to tell you about our education system. One of my teachers is here. Miss Civil, raise your hand there. And as far as I know, she's the only one that's still living that taught me in high school. Well, I will say I was a student. I'm not sure she taught me anything. One of the things about our education system that I've probably never heard of any other one in the country like it. At one time we had small schools. There was a little school right down here. Bill Hostball can tell you all about that one. There was one up above Smyrna Church there at Leonard Jones's home place. There was one over at Olivet Church where I grew up. And at that time, Olivet was about the biggest school around. They had 11 grades. And a lady that I've known all my life graduated from Monogram School. She was a valedictorian. She's the only person I've ever heard of that graduated twice from high school and became valedictorian twice. In 1922, they built Sherrill's Ford School. And when she graduated at Monogram in 1921, she went to Sherrill's Ford for her 12th grade and was valedictorian again. I've never heard of another situation like that. So things have really changed. If I had my ruthers, I'd be very honest with you, I'd love to be back to where I never seen any people again. But it's not that way.
Teacherage on the corner across from.
Yep.
That's the old Sherrill Ford teacher.
If I could, I'm John Cutchin. I'm Dr. Cutchin's son.
You knew you weren't going to get
Dad always said he knew I had made it when people started referring to him as John Cutchin's father instead of your Dr. Cutchin. The teacherage. When Sherrill's Ford was looking for a doctor years and years ago, Dad had fox hunting friends around here. Albert Setzer, Zeb Burris, Alonzo Burris, Burris Recliners in Lincoln. And he looked all over the state and decided on this area because it needed a doctor. It was a good place for fox hunting. And the Burris brothers said, you don't want to go to Denver. It's the poorest section of Lincoln County, which it was then. But we moved to the teacherage in '53. I think I'm right. The teacherage was called that because teachers from Sherrill's Ford that were old maids or whatever you want to call them, single, lived at the teacherage and went across the street. But we lived there for 5 years. Dad's office was downstairs. We lived upstairs. Foxhounds out back, horses. And talking about the lake coming up, what I remember my dad saying more times than not was when the lake was coming up and people were getting displaced because of the lake, Long Island. He said he treated more cases of damnitis than he had ever seen in his life.
My first trip to Dr. Cutchin was in 1953. Well, 54. Anyway, I get my dates mixed up. But anyway, I went to see him, and he examined me, and he said, well, I think you have a little touch of pregnancy. And sure enough, I was, and I have my daughter, Crystal Klein, here, and she's 63, I believe. So give you the dates out. Thank you.
All the traffic is around here right now. Back when I was a kid, we had a little 3-room house that sat right on where the discharge comes out of Lake Norman, right about where the bridge is at. I would sit on the porch, wait to see one car go by forever. And along about 3:45 in the afternoon, you might see 15, maybe 20 when the Mills and Mooresville would let out. And Highway 150 today is just like it was then, except a few turn lanes, maybe another red light, and the pavement's deeper. So 150 has not changed a whole lot. But obviously, change is coming. We can tell it's on the way.
My experience mainly is from the Long Island situation. Like someone mentioned a little bit ago, Long Island was obliterated. And we were told the mill's going to be moved, all the houses are going to be moved, the village will exist no longer. Well, I had lived there my whole life. Well, I got married about that time, so I didn't have to move because of it, but my family did. And my parents built a house in Iredell County and moved over there. But it's strange not to be able to go back to see your home place, not to go see your neighbors, not to go see where you played ball or where you had a garden and all that. It really was traumatic. So I'm with some of these people where there are reasons why you would say, I wish the lake had never come. Because I would have probably gone back and lived in Long Island. I loved it that much. But I'm sure there are a lot of good things about the lake, too.
Yeah, I'm a double eighth Sherrill descendant because my dad's grandfather and my mother's grandmother were first cousins through the Sherrills. So William Enos. Enos was your great grandfather. So anyway, but we all like that here in Sherrill's Ford. Before the lake came and before the lake people from somewhere else came, we were all kin to everybody else. And I've often thought it would be so much fun to go back and get a map and get the family names and connect them all. It would be a hard, probably, job, but that would just be a great thing to do, I think. But we did a little research, and she had in her scrapbook some things for instance, the potato house, or we call it the tater house, but it was built in 1938, the year my mother and my daddy got married, and it was built because they had hired a new agriculture teacher at Sherrill's Ford School, and he was talking with the local farmers, and they were discussing how to keep the sweet potato crop. It was very important, and they all had this common problem. So what he came up with was to build a storehouse, and so they sold shares to the storehouse. And Mr. Lindler, do any of you in here remember Mr. Lindler? Yeah, he was a local carpenter. His son married my mother's sister, and they ran the teacherage for a year when it was a boarding house. But anyway, he gave the land for it, and if you bought a share, you could pay $10, or you could pay 1,000 board feet of lumber, or you could pay 10 days labor. And what you would get would be a bin that would hold 50 pounds of sweet potatoes. So it held 5,500 pounds of sweet potatoes. So that's what it was. And then when the agriculture, didn't pan out, dwindled, then it became a clubhouse. And Mother went there when it was the home demonstration clubhouse, yeah. And then, of course, later the Lions Club used it. So all these years, that little building has meant so much to so many people. Now my daughter-in-law does photography in it. I mean, it has never quit being used. It's always been used. Yeah, dances in it. Yeah.
Jane, where is that place? Where is it?
The potato house, it's beside the school. It's behind the fire department and beside the school. Right. And one more thing, so I don't hog it. You could be living on Gabriel Road, because when they gave us all names for our roads, they were going to call it the Gabriel Road. And if you Google it, it might pop up as Gabriel Road. But my dad, who was the first building inspector in Catawba County, was working there at Newton, and he said, "There's no way you can call it the Gabriel Road." He said, "You'll have to call some other name that, because it's always been the Sherrill's Ford Road, and it should always stay the Sherrill's Ford Road." Yeah.
I'll talk about some before Lake Norman. When I looked over this bunch, I told them I was probably raised the poorest in the bunch. We lived down off of the road, and there's 8 children and a grandma and our parents. And to get to each room, you about had to cross a porch to get to it. And I found out, though, we were ahead of our times. We had grass-fed cattle, free-range chickens, a metal roof on the house, and we even had goose-down pillows. We had geese, and we'd turn them upside down on our laps and pick the feathers in the spring. And we even got enough that we had one goose-down feather mattress, and that's what the company slept on. And I went to monogram school for 7 years, and I finished at Sherrill's Ford. But at monogram, we had outside johns and a wood stove to heat, and you could take a jar of milk or a bag of turnip greens or some canned blackberries, and they would give you so many meals to eat in the lunchroom. And one of my favorite meals was stewed Irish potatoes, cornbread, and a bowl of stewed blackberries.
My name is Weddy Gabriel. I'm going to talk a little bit about the historical of the Corner family on this ground that you own now. I'm going back to slavery, if it's just okay. My grandfather was free from slavery on this ground you own now. At this time, Mr. Corner, it hadn't been too long, this was part of Langston County. And Mr. Corner, he was very, very rich. He'd actually show off, my grandfather said. He would light cigars with dollar bill across his leg. And he owned land from him. At that time, as I know where we're up south, was a dirt road to follow the river. He had on land all the way to what's called Bedford Road. When you cross Bedford Road into Mecklenburg County, you had to go through Lake Norman Chrysler now to get to it. But there are people down there now named Corners. He had a slave quarter down there. He had a slave quarter here. In fact, he owned 4. My grandfather sat down and he talked to me a lot about the history. And he said at that time a black man was not allowed to read. But a white lady slipped and taught him to read. And he found favor with old man Corner. So he rode horses for him. And he done him favors. So he didn't work too hard. So when he was free, he knew how to read the Bible very, very well. Pronounced the words very, very well, very vividly. And he started buying land, which I live approximately 1/2 a mile from here now, where I was born. And I had both grandfather and great-grandfather that were free from slavery here in Sherill, and both of them are buried up in Moscow Church, which is just about a mile. He became very, very industrious, my grandfather. I'm talking about on my mother's side, which is a corner. And he bought quite a bit of land. He sold quite a bit of it. If you go down Beatty Road in that circle where all those houses are, he once owned that. They called it the Raider Farm. But we still own quite a bit of land. I have children that know quite a bit of land he bought right after slavery. And I took a lot of my know-how and being honest and treat everybody right from my grandfather. But he talked about old man Corner. He said he was a very, very skilled man. When people would come up from Mecklenburg County or come from the mountain, he had a big circle barn on this land here you're at now. And they would park in the circle barn. And then he owned a very big, what you call store. And at that store they would meet and they would have a wonderful time. And when he would entertain them, also he sold horses. And a lot of time he was selling horses. I don't want to take too much time, but I just want to give you a little bit of history. But I finished high school in 1953. I remember Dr. Cush come out, and he was one of my doctors. He was my doctor too. And I went to A&T for a while. I wanted to be an engineer, but I found out I was going to have to leave North Carolina, so I tore my daddy's car. So I went into body work. So I went to Charlotte and learned how to fix cars after I come out of there. Then after I fixed cars, they offered me a job in Detroit, so I didn't want to take my children to Detroit. So I said, I'll go home and build me a small shop in Catawba County. Well, they told me, so you're going up there to starve. Well, I didn't starve, but I had to work hard. So I'm still here today, thank the Lord. I have 7 children, 7 grandchildren. They're all around me within walking distance, and great-grandchildren. I don't know what you say, that's good or bad. But I know most of the people here in Sherill because I fixed most of them cars. When we organized the fire department, I went with the gentleman Troutman, and I bought the fire truck back, the one they have on the board down, and I painted it first. I donated that. And I found out I couldn't be a fireman and work too, so I gave that up. But we have a great history. I'm proud of Catawba County. It's a wonderful county. And I've had a lot of support. When the integrated school, they made me president of the PTA, I don't know what, the 2nd or 3rd year. Is that right? I was scared to death. But Robert E.'s mother was a great friend. She worked with me. Miss Sigmund, his mother, was a great woman. Mr. Christenberry was a great man. He the one talked me into it. But Mr. Ryan, who was a gentleman from up north somewhere, was the principal. And he took me on my wings. I knew a lot about the Bible, but he taught me a lot more about the Bible. He was a minister. I don't know how many know he was a Nazarite. If any of you want to hear any sermons, I have sermons that he preached. I have his sermons in stock in my file that he preached. And he was a Nazarite. And he taught me many things. I'm going to shut up.
I would summarize it in one word. It was family.
I remember waking up on a Sunday morning, the mill was shut down. It was real quiet, and the quietness would almost deafen you.
In the summer months, we always went swimming. After the shift changed, they came home and we got our bathing suits and we went to the river.
We had 15 people in one car.
And I had a cousin that worked there. They didn't care. You could go over and visit all day if you wanted to.
I was born in the mill village and lived there until it closed.
Whenever I found out that they were closing the mills and going to be moving, I just cried.
Long Island is a great place to grow up.
You know, we didn't realize at the time how fortunate we were and how special it was.
If I knew that the mill would stay there for my entire life, I'd have probably stayed right there. Because it was that good of a life.